Great. So your work has been described as telling of large historical events through small lives, which I think is a very nice description. And I think theft does that as well. What is it about small lives that appeals to you?
I don't know kings and queens and heroes and generals and that kind of thing. So these are the people I know about and people I am like.
And this book, as it's set in Zanzibar, and it traces the lives of these three main characters. And we'll get to those three characters shortly. But I find the personality of Raya, the mother, very interesting. She kind of abandons her son, but then she later embraces him later in life when he's older. When did you first see her? When did the seed of that character first come to you?
I suppose she's not a unique history, as it were, as a person. I mean, her history would not be extremely unusual in the sense that quite a lot of people, young women, get pushed into marriage or into relationships like that out of a sense of protecting them, maybe the idea of the kind of protecting the honor of women and so on. So it's a patriarchal notion that, you must marry them off before they get into trouble kind of thing. So in that respect, she's not absolutely unreal. But not all of them, not all of these people, which is not to say there are millions of them, but not all of them actually have the strength, recklessness, or desperation to leave the situation, to get away from it. So I guess in her case, it's because she doesn't so much abandon her son, because it's, again, not unusual for young women to leave their children to be brought up by their parents while they go to work or while they study or whatever. And so she uses that kind of customary thing to make her escape. I guess later on, maybe she comes around and she thinks, well, maybe he's all right. He's a handsome young man. I don't have to do any work now.
Was the title something that came to you early, or was it something that came later on? Sorry?
In fact, it came late. But on reflection, it seems appropriate because there's so many thefts in the novel. It isn't just that one. Of course, Badr is accused of theft. That's That's the original idea. The injustice accusation was the original idea for me in writing the book, although it comes sort of halfway through or somewhere like that. But there are other thefts of childhood. The hotel is a stolen house. It used to belong to people. It's been stolen from them. And you might say there are small and big kinds of thefts all over the place. And I guess if you think of what it is that colonialism does, that too is a kind of theft. So it has many different levels, if you like, of meaning.
You mentioned the hotel, and I think the name of the hotel is Tamarind Hotel, and it's owned by Indians. And of course, it's, as an Indian reader, that kind of grabbed my attention immediately. But
it's a house that was owned by Indians. It's not now owned by Indians. Yeah.
But can we talk a little bit about that relationship, about what the place of the Indians at that time in Zanzibar?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a very long connection, centuries old. Because of the monsoons and the currents and so on, there's been back and forth between various parts of South Arabia, Asia, and East Africa. And in some ways, it still continues, although now people fly, of course, but it still continues. But it's a very old relationship, which goes back, certainly, the pilot who took Vasco da Gama from Malindi to Calicut was an Indian pilot. So even then, there was already an Indian community on the east coast of Africa. And I grew up with that knowledge and with that presence. Indian people from many different parts of India. There were Muslim Indians, there were Hindu Indians, Parsis, etc. They were all there. And their places of worship were just around the corner. So a mosque here, a temple there, Zoroastrian, whatever. But they have temples as well, don't they? I can't remember the name.
A fire temple.
Okay. Or the Aga Khan, the Jamaat, they're mosques everywhere. But then after the revolution, things changed dramatically. And this was to some extent deliberate. The government really did not want, the new government did not want the Indians to have quite so much economic control and power. So they removed the trading licenses, which means that there was no livelihood. So many people left. They weren't removed in the way that the Omani establishment, say, were forced out. They left because they couldn't make a living. So some moved to Dar es Salaam, some moved to Kenya, some went to India, Canada, all over the world, and many went to United Kingdom. Some of them even ending up not from Zanzibar, but from different parts of East Africa, ending up as being heads of government in the UK. But there is still a small Indian community now. Some are returning. Some are returning because they wish to reclaim what had been taken away from their parents, and some because they've retained that connection culturally, as it were. I meet people sometimes in London who say, my father and my uncle only speak to each other in Swahili, because they, in fact, think of themselves still as part of that culture and that world.
You just mentioned Swahili, and it just reminded me of something I'd read about how it was after the Nobel Prize that your book was translated for the first time into Swahili. What has been some of the responses from readers who read it in that language?
So far as I can tell, people are very kind and they seem very pleased. So I assume that they're telling the truth, that they're happy to have the book available. Some people are already reading it in English, of course, beforehand.
Yeah.
But one of the results of having it available in Swahili now is that it's likely to be introduced into the school curriculum. That means a lot more people will read it, because one of the rather sad things about books and reading and Tanzania and Zanzibar is that there isn't actually the culture of reading for pleasure. People read what they're told to read at school. That's what they read, because people don't buy books on the whole. So having a book introduced into the school curriculum is a sure way of, not only selling the book, of course, but it's a sure way of getting people to read, because that's the most likely place where they will pick up a book.
Does that mean there aren't many bookshops, and that wasn't something that you kind of grew up seeing or grew up visiting when you were living there as a teenager?
Well, things have got a lot worse in that respect. It was always difficult to get books, but there were one or two bookshops. And whenever people traveled, say to Dar es Salaam or to Mombasa or wherever, then one of the things they were likely to bring back as a gift would be a book, because books were kind of not so easy to find. But it's now a lot worse. Now the books really only sell books to tourists, so you'll see picture books and some novels and so on. But you know that at the price that they are being sold, that most people will have to think twice before buying a book because of the cost.
You have this nice phrase where you talk about, of course, the importance of writing, and you talk about exile, and you say the anguish of a stranger's life made you a writer. Can we talk a little bit about that? Can you elaborate on that phrase?
Kind of obvious in a way that being a stranger, especially young, 18, as I think I also mentioned, without any skills, without any money and so on, without any experience of travel. So there are two things I think that are a problem for somebody in that situation. One is the intimidating newness of everything, and how do you cope with that? And it's all the small details, things like how do you open an account in a bank? How do you enter a bank? How do you go into a cafe? How do you order food? Etc. I mean, really, there's small, trivial things that terrify the stranger. But the other thing is that the stranger is also probably constantly thinking about what has been left behind. So there are two terrors going on in the mind of this poor fellow. So that's the anguish I'm describing, trying to understand, disentangle, come to terms, grow out of all of those anxieties, and I suppose be comfortable if possible.
And how did writing help you grapple with this anguish?
Writing for many people, I don't mean writing as a profession. I mean writing. A lot of people do it, and they don't do it because they want anybody else to see it, but writing helps to sometimes to just disentangle things. And sometimes it's something that we do because we just feel so bad, and writing makes us feel even worse. So we can indulge our misery. And there's something pleasurable in that, in a way. not because you're going to revisit it, although revisiting it is also interesting. So did I really feel that bad? Yeah, I did. Yeah. And there's a kind of way of controlling something, controlling how you feel, understanding it, but also putting it into words. So it's not just something that's making me depressed, but it's something I'm trying to understand. Hey, and that sentence is not bad, that sort of thing.
Your first novel came out nearly 40 years ago. Has your process of writing changed a lot over these 4 decades?
Yeah, sure, because for every writer, it must be so. But certainly for me, the early writing is done with a great deal of uncertainty. You don't really know precisely the effect that you're after. You don't know whether this is this is going to read okay. You don't hear what you're writing quite so well. You're not experienced to know what works and what doesn't work. And so the learning process is in those early books. That's how you learn. At least for me, anyway. That was how I learned to get to the effects I wanted. Then it becomes more assured, both because people respond and say, I like that, I like that. If they go, okay, that worked, that's good. I can relax about that now. Next time I want to write about something like the interior of a house, it's okay, I know how to do that now, that sort of thing. So it gets easier to a certain extent, but it's still not that easy, but it gets easier. There's certain things you know how to do, and you know if it sounds right and if it doesn't sound right.
Coming back to theft, I think when you have these two characters, Badr and Kareem, and I think there's one moment when someone tells Badr, I think it was Haji, who says that, oh, you went back to your village, it must have been great, everyone's just sitting under the tree and enjoying their life. And then Badr thinks to himself, no, but that's not how it is, right? People in the village are working all the time. And he realizes that, living in a prosperous family, they have such mistaken notions of what village life is. Can we talk a little bit about creating the character of Badr, and also, how removed prosperous families or well-off families are just from reality often?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, Badr is somebody who is powerless. He's taken out of school. He's made into a servant. He doesn't understand. He doesn't know his parents, his actual parents. He knows the people who brought him up, but he doesn't know it. So I was wanting to construct somebody who is powerless, but intelligent, and able to see and understand what's going on around him. I guess the idea was to see how does somebody in that situation with those obstacles, as it were, how would they find a way out of the situation? So that was my interest in him, especially if then at some point he's unjustly accused of theft. How does somebody make his way, or her way, in this case, his way in the world after that? That was my interest in him. And so he had to be placed in a sense in conditions that would dramatically reveal this. And so he is a servant not in a poor man's house, but a servant in a rich man's house. And so this way you have the contrasting. And it enabled the story of Haji and Raya and Karim then also to develop alongside this. So it's not only Badr's story, it's also how other people, rich or poor, cope with what life throws at them.
I find the relationship between Kareem and Badr very interesting, because initially Kareem is kind of curious about this boy who's working in the house, but then he takes him home, and actually he's the one who provides him a way out when he is accused of theft. Can we talk a little bit about their dynamics and also about Kareem himself?
Kareem is somebody, although he too is from a troubled family, but all along he has support. His grandmother first, then his brother, and he's an intelligent, handsome, dynamic young man. So he has what Badr doesn't have in full. They're both intelligent young people, but this one has opportunities opening up in front of him and has the support of family and friends and so on. He's not isolated. He grows up with self-assurance. He grows up knowing how he's clever and he's handsome and whatever. So so he's a contrast in that sense, but he's also the means with which, I suppose, the means with which Badr finds a way out of that situation. because he takes him on, he helps him. And the important thing is to understand this helping. Because there's also a kind of self-gratification. There's also a sense of patronage, which is not unusual.
Right.
People sometimes do things that out of kindness, but they also expect deference out of it. They expect gratitude and so on. And that's where the relationship breaks down. But I think I'll leave it at that so we don't tell the readers too much.
No, when I write the piece, I won't give away too many spoilers, but that's I wanted to ask you, I think there was this very nice description of how growing up, you grew up watching the shoreline in Zanzibar and used to watch the fishermen come bring their sort of boats ashore, etc. So maybe this is a slightly, what should I say, metaphoric question, but do you think the sea affects your writing? Because I think, again, so much of your work is about displacement and about migration, etc. And the sea is such a powerful motif of movement and of migration itself. So does the ocean kind of come into your work, and in what ways?
Well, as you mentioned, I grew up, I saw the sea every day because not only, I didn't even have to move from the house, from the window of the house, I can see the sea. But all the way, all the way to school, all the way back, all the way to the post office, the sea was around us all the time. And so my horizon is the horizon of the sea. There are no mountains in Zanzibar. When I was certainly, of course, I traveled in other places. But so the sea is not only not very far, but its presence is also about other places. I knew, even as a child, that over there were Bombay, as we used to call it in those days, or Aden, or whatever, Basra, etc. I knew that the sea was not empty water, but that the sea was part of this network. I wouldn't have known to use that word, but it was part of this network of exchange and transmission and cultures and stories and whatever. So the sea was not empty. The sea was full of cities and stories.
And when you're writing, especially if I'm not mistaken, you wrote this book while you're based in the UK. But of course, this book is very much set back in Zanzibar. So what is it like when you're writing about a place when you're so far removed from it?
Back. It's not like it's not removed from my mind and my imagination. I go back regularly when I see. So the Tamarind Hotel, I've even stayed in a place like the Tamarind Hotel, but only after I'd written about it. So I had to imagine it first and then to go and stay in it as it happened, not deliberately, but as it happened. So it's not so difficult because I left when I was 18 years old. I've been, once I was able to return, which was some while, but once I was able to return, I've been a very regular visitor. So my memories are refreshed all the time. It's not difficult. You don't forget.
I'm sure you've been asked this question before, but I think even I'll have to ask you. This is the first book you've written after winning the Nobel Prize. So do you feel the expectations weighing down on you, or is that something you can just sort of switch off?
I didn't feel anything like that at all. Yes, you're right. Several people have asked about this, and it's reasonable. I was in the middle of writing. I was kind of like 20% or so in the early stages of writing this book when the announcement came. And because it's such an overwhelming thing, the award of the Nobel Prize, then there wasn't any time to write. I just had to meet people, read contracts and blah, blah, travel and so on. And then I was able to return. So when I was able to return, it was more with a little bit of anxiety. Is it still going to be okay? Sometimes when you read a book for a long time, you go back and it's rubbish. You have to start again, But it seemed all right. So I just picked up. It didn't make any difference to me. I mean, nor did it make any difference to my computer that I had been given the award. It's just you still have to do all the thinking and you still have to make the words do the work. So no, it didn't bother me.
And the 20% that you had written, was it the beginning of the novel? What is right now the beginning, or it was another part?
There's maybe a little bit of a shift. I think I started with Badr. So the Badr part of it was the first thing that I wrote. I can't remember at what stage I was. I think I had already included I think the Raya came in quite early as well. But I can't remember precisely. I'd have to go back to my old files and find where was I when that happened? But,
oh, wonderful. I think I have about all my questions, and I think we're nearly out of
yeah,
time.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe again, when I think of the book, I do think a lot of Fosia, right? I think again, she's a very compelling character, and she's very scholarly, but then again, she's kind of pulled into motherhood. Then she has this background of epilepsy, which she's always sort of grappling with, and she's worried about her child getting it. Again, maybe what were some of your inspirations behind a character like her?
Yeah. Well, I had a colleague who here at the university when I was still working there, who had a child. Well, he had 2 children, but both of them were born with epilepsy, and she used to talk about it, and the various treatments and so on, and they were fine. It was all under control, and medically being looked after, and so. And it made me wonder, because one of the problems in Zanzibar is the health resources available. How would people have dealt with epilepsy, particularly people of an older generation? How would they have understood it? So I began to read about that and read a little bit about epilepsy and trying to imagine somebody like Fauzia's mother, who not only loses her pregnancy, has a problem giving birth, and then the child actually ends up being epileptic, and the kind of terrifying possibilities that she sees, and she sees her child suffer, and wouldn't have access to medical resources that would say to her, it's okay, we can control this, it's not a problem. So that was what brought her into existence, as it were. See how the mother's anxiety is then passed on to her, and so she too doesn't understand fully that in fact it's something that can be controlled, that it isn't something terrifying. Well, it is, but it isn't impossible to keep it under control. So that's the kind of the idea of her being worried, being anxious. But then there is another side to it, which is how does she come out of it also? So in all these 3 cases, how do these people learn to cope with life, with what life has given them, rather, should I say?
Yeah, out of time. But no, thank you so much for speaking to me.
It's been nice talking to you.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.